beat the drum, let the organ play. Join in the moonlight and come and have a play. Moonlight, poor man's lantern. Moonlight, show me emotion. People come from far and near. Sound of music in the air. Come and make your motion and dance in the moonlight till it late.
One definition of the word heritage is that which is or may be inherited. My definition of the word heritage is history distilled. Let's examine those concepts. When one inherits something, it is always given to us. You cannot create an inheritance. Someone creates it and gives it to you. You then take it and do something with it. You either waste it or you use it profitably. My definition is history distilled. Heritage is history distilled. What is history? History is the past. It is also the study of the past. All time, all events, by all places. That is history, a vast open area. Heritage is that history distilled. What is distilled? What is distillation? It is the process of changing one substance into another, purifying it, in other words, making it suitable for oneself or for others, for one's pleasure, for one's profit. And so, heritage is history distilled, taking that vast area of history and purifying it, making it suitable, making it understandable, making it real, substantial for us, for oneself, for others. Throughout our history has been somebody else's story, a Eurocentric story. It is now time for us, as we celebrate birthdays, as we celebrate anniversaries, as we celebrate independence, it is time for us to distill that history and make it our own. It is time for us to create what has been given to us, what we understand as ours. That is our heritage. I'm Chester Connell, and over the next half hour, we will share some special time with a special person, a person of heritage, a person who is not only a storyteller herself, but who is an example of the heritage that is ours. She is one of the many people who has created that inheritance which she gives to us, which she passes on to us. It is up to us to understand that heritage, to learn that heritage, to receive that heritage, that inheritance, and make it suitable, distill that history for ourselves. Her name is Jean Duncan. Jean Duncan is our first official broadcaster in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. She is also the first female broadcaster in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. She sits down and shares with us her stories, her history, which is our history. She is a part of our heritage. Please enjoy the next few minutes in a conversation with Jean Duncan in this, A Heritage of Hairouna.
If we look back to the early 1950s, up to that time, St. Vincent had no broadcasting station. However, when Mr. A.V. Sprott, you remember Vince Sprott? When he was Public Relations Officer, they now call that department API. It was then GIS after PRO, and now it's API. Well, when he used to publish a weekly newspaper. He used to call it was called a newsletter. He'd have that printed at the government printing office. And he soon realized that this was not accessible to everyone. He said there were some people who couldn't read, and there were some who couldn't care less to read. So he thought, well, the ideal thing would be if we had a broadcast station, but we didn't. And then he said, but wait, you have these radio hams, Mr. Weston Lewis is one. So we might be able to get something on the air, and I know people would listen. They wouldn't have to be bothered to read, and they can listen and get the news. And we can have this is a weekly paper, and we can have a weekly broadcast. So he said he would get in touch with Mr. Weston Lewis. And as a result of their discussion, a Sunday afternoon broadcast was set up every Sunday from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock from Mr. Weston Lewis's home. He lived in Middle Street, just at the back, you can say, of the Methodist Church Hall, just in that area there. Well, I was asked to present news and to do a children's quarter of an hour one Sunday in every month. And I think that resulted because I was at the public library working, and I had introduced a children's storytelling on Saturday mornings from 9. And when Christmas came, a big Christmas party, I could get a tree from one of the firms and ask for gifts and so forth. So I suppose that's why they thought of asking me to do the children's quarter of an hour, which we started off. And you had a sports cast. The two persons who did that, Moulton Williams and Frank Thomas. And a feature. I remember Mrs. Brooms very often did a feature. And we went for 2 hours. Even in 1955, when Hurricane Janet was threatening St. Vincent, Mr. Sprott decided that we have to go on the air to bring the people up, because up to then, none of the Windward Islands had any broadcast station. And, well, when we started, but at this time now, Wibbs was there, and they were only doing 3 hours a day. That was in Grenada, the Windward Islands broadcasting. So Mr. Sprott went down there, and I stayed at his office receiving cables, bringing you up to date with what's happening from cable and wireless. And I would just prepare it for newscasts and give the office attendant to take down. Well, I could remember at about 4 o'clock, he said, Jean, he rang me and he said, I think you better try and get home now, because according to what they say, it should be striking St. Vincent at 6. So I let out, but at that time the whole town was empty, because they had closed all business places, all government offices, and so I was sort of alone on the road, more or less. Not really, but the streets empty. I could recall a good friend of mine, Vernita Thibbles, that's Marjorie Jackson's younger daughter. We were very close friends, and she was coming up the road. I said, just before you get to the National Commercial Bank downtown, and she said, Jean, come turn back with me to go to matinee. And then I just heard a voice say, listen to me, Jean, get home and meet Laney. Sylvia Wilson's mother, she had a snack at right there. And she was standing there. She said, get right home and meet Laney. I don't know where Vern was going, because I'm sure there was no matinee that afternoon. And then when I got walking around the park, a car pulled up, coming from the opposite direction, up from the top of the park. It was the mission car, and Mrs. Broom said, Jean, I'm sorry I can't turn back to get you home. Try and hurry home. We are moving the Snellings, the minister at Monco. We're moving them down to the Snellings around the park. That's Lindo in the back. And so I got home, and when I got home there, I turned on the radio to, as I told you, Wibbs was on, just in time to hear the governor, I think it was a Deverell, wishing St. Vincent a safe passage through the storm, and the station went off. Well, I later discovered they didn't know, but he didn't know that the hurricane started to hit Grenada then. And that's when, well, of course, I think you would know the rest, that we only got some rough seas and so forth. We were lucky. Grenada got the brunt of it. So that was up to at 1955. Shortly after that, the 4 governments of the islands, shortly before that, I should say, the short government, in 1955, the governments of the 4 Windward Islands got together and they set up the Windward Islands Broadcasting Service. And as I told you, they began just 3 hours a day. But as time went on, they increased their hours and everything. And then it was 1959. They decided to, all the premiers in the islands, to set up some low-powered medium wave stations in all the islands, including Grenada, because which would be the network main station, and all islands. And they were, of course, as time went by, the power would increase, but they were low powered when they first started. Of the four local stations in all the islands, only Grenada and St. Vincent had island coverage. In St. Vincent, we had a 500-watt transmitter station at Brighton with a 25-watt relay transmitter at Belmont near Chateaubriand. So we had complete island coverage. St. Lucia and Dominica didn't.
And do we know why that was?
I don't know. That's up to the governments to decide whether they wanted to have island coverage, because they were the ones who initiated it all. Mm-hmm. So St. Vincent, our transmitter was at Brighton, and the relay one down on the leeward end, there near to Chateaubriand, Belmont on the leeward end. Well, each local station was staffed with a program organizer and a technician, and they were all sent from WIBS in Grenada. Nobody local. Well, at that time, most of the programs came out of the network. And then in 1968, the premiers of the Windward Islands, decided that the program organizer of these stations should be a national. And this was advertised, and stating that the applicant must be someone with previous broadcasting knowledge. And this is where I came into the picture. I was bombarded. I said to all who came to me, but I'm in a job. At that time, I was the executive officer at the magistrate's office. To tell you a little about that, when I went there, it was a senior clerk post. And one day, I was told that it was the magistrate, Mr. Rawls, said that I came there and I cleaned up the place and so on. They upgraded the thing to an executive officer and appointed me there.
Like many broadcasters, Jean Duncan began her professional life as a teacher. She now takes us back to the early 1950s, before radio.
And when school opened in 1952, I was not able to go out. 6 weeks I had to have that leg in class to class.
As a teacher?
Teacher at Thomas Saunders. So when I went back, I was scheduled at the prep school under Miss Katie Wilson. I taught, my class had Clifford Edwards and boys like that. And girls, some of them, don't forget me, some of the girls, and so that's how up at Graves now I can get my groceries, but I can't go out. She said, I don't see her. And she said, no, tell her call out and we'll send her groceries and that type of thing every Thursday and whatnot. Yes, so I was teaching at the prep school. And one day, I recall, I don't know if you would have known where head office, which we call government office, because I worked there after a while. In that building, part of it is in the yard where you go through to go up to the schools and so on.
Behind National Commercial Bank.
Yes. And head office, the government office was upstairs there. And as I was coming down one day to go home, I heard a call from the personnel officer, called me from upstairs. Jane, come here, I want to see you. It was Mr. Noel Venner at the time. He said, why you never applied to come into the public service? So I said, my dad said he didn't want us, although he was a public servant. He had his reason. He said, well, listen to me. I stay here at the window during lunchtime, after lunch, and looking out from that window at the back there. And when you are walking up, going home from lunch, I see these prep school children having a tussle. Each one wants to get to hold your hand. I look at it and I'm so thrilled. I said, yes, that is true. They leave the school and come up to what he says by the Iron Gate, what we call the Iron Gate. That is the entrance going up where the Barclays Bank at the back of the back.
So there used to be a gate there.
Well, we would not know it, but it was there before. So the iron stakes are still there, you see. So it was known as the Iron Gate. When you go into school, you say, meet me by the Iron Gate, and that type of thing. So he said, they come up to the gap and meet you by the Iron Gate. He said, well, I'm going to tell you something. Our chief librarian, she's away studying, and we have a replacement for her from Trinidad. And that Miss Michael says that she thinks that the children's library books should not be among the shelves with the others. They should have a separate place for the children's library. And I thought you would be the ideal person to deal with the children's library. I said, but Daddy, he said, look, you take this application and go and discuss it with Daddy. A Friday evening it was. And Daddy said, Jane, well, it's up to you. And then I was posted at the library. Not to work in the children's section alone, I had to work throughout the whole library, but I was responsible for it. And that's when I started the children's Saturday morning program.
This is in 1952.
52. One day, the librarian got a call saying that they want to borrow me at head office. Apparently, one of the typists, because head office, everything used to happen from there. You didn't have ministries, you just had departments, all the files and everything. And one of the typists is ill and whatnot, and they want to borrow me because they got in touch with Mrs. Mackey, who put to recommend somebody, and she recommended me because I used to do typing at Mrs. Mackey. To borrow me was permanent. They never sent me back to the library. And because after the typist came back, I was drafted in to the regular. As a matter of fact, that's how I come to know all about EXCO, because I had to deal with the minutes.
What's EXCO?
Executive Council meeting, what is now, you had the cabinet, which is now cabinet. The parliamentary thing was called the, what do you call it? I mean, things are going for me. And the cabinet was EXCO meeting. And when they make their decisions in EXCO, Executive Council, and the meetings, I would have to do extracts to put on the different files, because all files were at headquarters, you see, and those would be sent to the different ministries with whatever decisions and so. And I was there all that time. I was borrowed once to go up to the high school when I was up there, but back down to where I was. In those days, I think it has been dropped now. You had to do an efficiency bar exam to get promotion. And I was in personnel up there, and Mr. Vincent King said to me, I'm sending you to do the efficiency bar exam. That's in 59. I said, oh my God, look how long I left school. You have to do English and all those English composition and all. He said, you can fuss as much as you like. I am sending you. My dear, 14 of us went. But we used to have lectures. The English was done by Mr. Parker Eustace. And different subjects we had to do and so forth. We sat the exam up at the grammar school. I could remember the afternoon. One of the persons was Arthur Williams. When we coming down, if you heard, man, a composition we had to do, and what he said, and what name he gave we had to give a name to the thing. And they all talking, and I was as silent as anything. because it didn't sound like anything I did.
So Arthur Williams, the lawyer.
Yeah.
He was
He was at the post office working at that time.
as
Just a clerk at
Okay.
the post office. So he was one, Maxie Daisy and Pompey, Judith Ledgerwood, all of them. 14 of us sat. One day, I was in personnel, and I saw Mr. Eustace Park. He come up and he went into Mr. Vincent King, who was the assistant administrator. Well, I didn't study what it is. After he left, Mr. King called me. He said, "Come here. Why did you tell me that you didn't want to sit the efficiency bar exam?" I said, because I said, we have to do composition, and look how long I left school. He said, "You saw Mr. Eustace Parkin there?" He said, "I don't have to tell you this, but because of that, he brought the results, his results. And he said to me, I have never read more beautiful written English than what Jane Duncan presented, that I couldn't find marks to give her." I looked at him. He said, "I didn't have to tell you this."
and Parker
I
used to
was
said that.
I was shocked, That's what Mr. King said. I was really shocked, especially hearing how the others. When the results came out for the whole exam, only 2 of us passed. Fitzroy Dowers, he used to be at the customs at the time. He rang me the other day because he told me he's back in St. Vincent. Bosco, we used to call him. Only Fitzroy and I passed. All the others had to sit over their exams. Some didn't sit over. But that's the only how you could have gotten promotion. Well, Arthur left after that and went to do law, study law and so forth.
And what was that exam?
Efficiency bar exam, the efficiency bar exam.
And that was for public servants?
To be promoted. Yes, because at that time now I was then promoted to be a senior clerk. And at Joshua, the next month or two, became the first chief minister, and I was sent to be his secretary. I was there with him all the time, up till, well, if he was alive, you'd hear he called me Little Miss D, and he had me as if I was, his daughter. He believed in me. When he came in 61, Little Miss D, I see we made it again. That is the 61 election. I understand when we lost, as neat as you are, you were to be thrown through the window. I just had to laugh, And when they had the Mombentic strike, he was not here. He was abroad. He was in Barbados. And he came. Where was he? Can't remember, but he called me from his home at Edinburgh. Nobody knew. He said, "Remember, I am not here." He said, "I am the Prime Minister, the Chief Minister," with that thing at Mombentic. He called me. He said, "Come over, I want to see you." He talked to me and he told me, he said, Clive Tannis is the Minister of Labour Minister of Labour. He's in Barbados on a thing. I called him and I told him I'm going to send for him because he has to come to handle that. So he called me now and told me, go and book a passage at Liat. Well, when I called, Emmanuel Washington said to me, "We have no passages." So I rang back Mr. Joshua and he said that I must charter a flight. So I went up on the charter flight. Even Emmanuel said he was off and he went up too. He was working at Liat. When I got there, Clive was at the airport. He said, "Jean, I know you have friends and some relatives up here. If you want to call them or anything like that, I'm in no hurry, So I only went and called one person. And Clive came back. Mr. Joshua, we had me like, I don't know, anything. He would call me any hour of the night and say, "Look, take down this so that you'll have it ready for me when I come in the morning." He dictates something, One day I said to him, "Mr. Joshua," and I told him the story I just told you about the efficiency bar exam, and I have understood people who sat and failed have been promoted. And I'm still, and I will passed and they're promoted, he left. He went up to speak to Mr. Brathwaite right away, his assistant administrator. When he came back, he told him, they know that Mr. Joshua don't want to lose me. So that's why they haven't been able to, because they haven't got that post in there. He told them, in as much as I don't want to lose little Miss D, I would not stand in her way for promotion. And that's how I got moved from there and got promoted. You see how things are? You see? I mean, every time I think of these things, when I heard of 2 persons promoted to class 1 class, I said, what? And they failed the exam. So I told Mr. Joshua about it. And he right away went up and anytime he saw me, little Miss D, how are you? And so, very, 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 very good.
What was Ebenezer Theodore Joshua like? How would you describe him?
Well, to me, I described him as a person who would put himself out of the way to help others. That's how I saw him. Somebody came to him with a problem and he would even call me and say, Miss D, now see how you could help. So she's in the, and that type of thing. That's how I would see him. Always try to help others, regardless of who they were. That's how I saw it.
Jean Duncan sharing some of our heritage on A Heritage of Hairouna. Join us again as we continue the story, our history, our heritage, on this, A Heritage of Hairouna. I'm Chester Connell.